So, I have wanted to talk to you ever since I first read the speech you gave about your decision to take down the Confederate monuments in New Orleans.
Thank you.
And I will tell you, you know, I spent a lot of my career writing speeches with Barack Obama and writing speeches about race with Barack Obama, and that to me was one of the best speeches on race that I've ever read. And I was just wondering, can you talk about how it is that a white Southern guy decided to write a speech like that? Where did that speech come from?
Yeah, from New Orleans. I mean, you know, our city, you only have to spend a minute here to know that this is a city that's deeply rooted in love and caring and affection, and we bleed diversity as a strength, not a weakness. That's kind of who we are. And so a lot of people had been trying to take those monuments down for a long time, and I certainly didn't do it by myself. A lot of people helped. I think about Aretha Castle Haley and Lola Seeley and a lot of really important folks. Memorial, both memorials, worked on it. But in the South, and we continue to struggle, and of course nationally now with what's going on in Virginia, with the issue of race. And we've never in this country acknowledged, although there have been some people that have talked about the original sin of slavery, and we've never really kind of gone through the discussion of race and racial reconciliation the way that we need to, which is why we can't exercise it from who we are as a country, and why we're never ever going to get to be that more perfect union that President Obama talked about. And in his echoing of Dr. King about the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, we always down here added, but somebody has got to do the bending. And as we were, probably everybody in here got beat to death by Katrina. Some of our brothers and sisters, literally 1,800 people. City got destroyed, 500,000 homes hurt, 250,000 gone. Everybody in here lost. I mean, like, really important stuff. And as we started to rebuild the city, one of the things that the people of the city gave me permission to do, and which we all did together, was to start trying to rebuild the city. But we had to really look hard at ourselves. And this was really a miracle that you guys should just pat yourselves on the back for. We didn't build it back the way it was. We realized that on August 28, 2005, when that storm hit and it destroyed everything, that it wasn't perfect the day it hit. And if we were going to build it back, we kind of started thinking about, well, what would it look like if we got it right the first time? And so when we started doing that, besides building back our schools and our health clinics and our hospitals and the new airport, by the way, which you're going to love. It's going to be open in May. You're going to love it. The public spaces came into focus for us. And what happened to me personally was in 2014, which was a good 4.5 years ago, when I started thinking about how to commemorate the 300th anniversary, because we're older than the country, by the way.
Yeah.
Everybody else is welcome. We were here first. We were here first, getting it on together, having a good time, hanging out, mini jazz fest a long, long time ago. I asked Wynton Marsalis, who I grew up with, help me curate the 300th anniversary. I mean, how would we do it? What would it look like? How long would it take? And he said, I'll do that for you. He says, but I want you to do something for me. And I said, what? He goes, I want you to think about taking Robert E. Lee down. And I mean, honestly, no, I swear. Brittany. And I said, no, honestly, I swear. I said, I mean, my first reaction was not good. I was like, what did you say? He goes, you ought to think about taking that down. And I said, well, why would I do that? I mean, it was such a startling thing. And he said, this is what he said to me. He said, have you ever thought about it from our perspective? And I said, Wynton, I've walked by those monuments every day of my life. And no, I haven't. He goes, would you do me a favor? He goes, will you think about it from my perspective? And he said, oh, by the way, he said, you know, Louis Armstrong never came back here and left because of those monuments. And when he said that to me, besides being embarrassed, I I thought to myself, it was like getting hit in the head with a ton of bricks, because I had known already about the great diaspora and how many of our fellow Americans left the South and took their intellectual capital, their raw material, their raw talent to New York and to Baltimore and to St. Louis and to Chicago and to Los Angeles. And all of our people are like helping people learn how to cook and dance and being doctors all over the country. And all of our stuff, like we did post-Katrina, where we got up in everybody's pot around the country, that happened back in the day. And so I just thought about how much we had lost because, you know, our folks were not here. And so as I started to do what Wynton asked me to do, which was really think about it from his perspective, it became pretty clear to me pretty quickly, number one, that those monuments were a lie. That that in essence, what they was revering an individual for doing something that was contrary to what the values of the United States of America ever stood for. And it was done for the purpose of preserving slavery. So here we were in a majority African-American city. Here's a guy named Robert E. Lee who'd never been here, or if he was here for a minute. And we were revering him for trying to destroy the United States of America for the purpose of preserving slavery. And I thought to myself, you know, that's not the New Orleans that I know. And that's not the New Orleans that we're trying to build. So if our 300th anniversary is coming, and we're trying to reflect to the rest of the world that diversity is a strength, not a weakness, and that we're an inclusive society, then that thing really couldn't stay there. But I really did say to myself, you know, I'm not sure I'm responsible for that. And then I found out that actually the city owned it and the mayor was directly responsible for it. So I was like, oh, hell. You know how, like, you try to get out of, like, raking the leaves, but, you know, your mama says you're going to do it? So
did you have doubts? Did you have concerns?
When I first started, I didn't want to spend... We were rebuilding the city, right? We were building the streets. I was filling the potholes, fixing the lights. You know, 470,000 of them, by the way. Trying. And everybody.
It's a work in progress.
And we had a. You know, we filled 470,000. I'm sorry. I know we got a lot more. I had to explain. When we decided to take them down. I think I was at a meeting of racial reconciliation, and I said something really simply. I said, I think we ought to start thinking about taking the monuments down. And I'm telling you, all hell broke loose when I said that. And all of a sudden, everybody in the world who wasn't from here, that doesn't own a piece of New Orleans, that thought they could tell us what to do, went crazy and said, you can't take them down. So we went through about, 2.5 years, 13 judges, 7 lawsuits, a lot of yelling and screaming at the city council and at the legislature. And we finally got it. But I thought I had to explain to the country, and particularly to the people of New Orleans, why we did what we did. And I intended to write a speech that would course-correct history, and that actually was a direct refutation to a speech that was given on the day that it was put up by a guy named Charles Fenner. Wow. And I wrote the speech so that when people read it years from now, they would see that a mayor, who was a Confederate soldier, by the way, a Confederate officer who was the mayor back then, Mayor Behan, and Charles Fenner, on the day that they put it up, I wanted to directly challenge the fact that they had made a historical error, that it was a lie, and that we were going to course correct history and then write the reason for it. And that's why I wrote the speech.
So, thinking about history, my wife always says that one of the most difficult things to explain in our history books is going to be that the first black president of the United States was followed by Donald Trump. And not only that, but that there were a lot of voters, not just in the South, but in every region of this country, who voted twice for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump. And I know you spent a lot of time thinking about this. What do you think about those voters, why they did that, and sort of how we can move out of this place that we're in right now?
Well, first of all, I'm very unhappy about it.
For sure.
I'm very unhappy about it. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I'm unhappy that he got elected. But I did think, like every American should, that when you have a new president, that hopefully the president or whoever that person is that occupies that office, and you've been there and you work there, you know what it is, and you'll understand what I'm saying, that every human being that got any sense of humanity in their body would be formed by the majesty of that office. And even, I know. And it's such an ominous, awesome place, and it's got so much power that almost every human being that's occupied that space has gotten better over time, even though they've made mistakes. It just that weight of that office has a way of doing that to you. And so early on, I was hopeful that was going to happen to him, but it became very clear pretty soon that this guy is very different than anybody that's ever stepped in that office, and that he's denigrated it, and he has continued to every day, almost in a weird kind of way, dumb down the office of the presidency lower than anybody would ever think that it would go. So I think I can't get into the heads of people that voted for Obama and then voted for Trump, other than to say that we ought to all be aware of the fact that happened, all right? And then ask ourselves, well, what was the environment wherein somebody who voted for Obama would vote for Trump? What kind of pain were they in? They obviously were not casting a racial vote at that time. They were thinking about something else. Now, having said that, one of the things that President Trump has done, and I think he does it purposefully, intentionally, and tactically, is he has unleashed this sense that white supremacy and white nationalism and hatred and racism is okay. And a lot of people have begun to speak overtly about this, and we continue to struggle with this in the country in a way that we have to be very forceful in pushing back against. So whether it's voter suppression, whether it's mass incarceration, a criminal justice system that doesn't work, blackface, I mean, all of that stuff is it's kind of the same string in a long history of oppression that we have got to confront as Americans and get past and get beyond, because we're never, ever going to be the country that we want to be if we don't really value that proposition that diversity is a strength. And New Orleans, I say this to you, the people in New Orleans understand this really well. We actually get it down here, although we have a long way to go and we're not perfect. We kind of like hanging out with each other and being together. And it's not that we don't have challenges in New Orleans, but it's very, very different from other places. But we're obviously in a very difficult moment, and we're being led in the wrong direction by a man that does not have a good heart and doesn't have a good mind relating to this particular subject.
Now, last question. You have recently said that you are leaning against running for president in 2020. What's made you decide that? And then what specific qualities are you looking for in the Democratic nominee for president?
Well, first of all, you know, it's a very hard thing to do. You've been there before. There are a lot of other great people running, and my sense of it is right now that the field is really crowded, and there are going to be a lot of great candidates, every one of whom is going to be better than Donald Trump. So I think that's all right. I struggle though, and you guys may not like what I'm about to tell you, but I struggle with a couple of different things, my heart and my head. Mm-hmm. And y'all were having this discussion just a minute ago about policy and what you would like to see happen, and which one of these candidates you think is going to articulate where they might be on issues that are of great importance to you. I think that tactically, the only thing we ought to think about is who is the person that can best and most assuredly beat Donald Trump. Period. End of story. And that's gonna require.
And what do you think? How do you measure that? How do you measure who can beat Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, on election night, I couldn't breathe. I could not believe what I was watching, and I would have bet $1 million that morning that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president of the United States. So I think we have to be very smart, and as we struggle with these aspirational and very important visions, how do you have a great and clean environment? How do you beat back climate change? I mean, look, the people in this audience know a lot about the impact of the coast disappearing. Our coastline goes away 100 yards every 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's shrinking, and the sea's rising, and we're not getting any nutrients into our marsh from the Mississippi River. And in 50 to 100 years, New Orleans, as you know, it's going to look very different unless we do something dramatically different. So they know.
Right.
But I'll say this, as we get into the primaries, I think that we have to be very smart. I think there should be an aggressive primary. I think people ought to have to fight like crazy to get the nomination. I think they ought to have good, thoughtful ideas. But I think we ought to be all smart enough to make sure that the person standing is standing well, standing tall, standing strong, so they can do the thing that we absolutely need. Because here's the thing. If you don't win, you cannot govern. I mean, you just got to remember that as we go forward. And so we're going to have to struggle through this tension of how far and how fast we go on matters that are really, really important to us and to the future of the country, knowing that the country is generally split, even if there was another Republican in office. So if Trump's not there, the next guy standing in line is Pence.
Not good.
I'm just saying, you got to think about these things. This is chess. It's not checkers.
Do you
Right?
think a Democrat can get elected president speaking as honestly and powerfully as you did about race in America?
Well, honestly, I hope so. I mean, I just think that. I mean, this is just me. I'm free. I'm not elected anymore. I'm an old politician that's unemployed, basically. I mean, that's kind of what I am. But I did find in my later years of elected office the freedom to speak my mind, and you all gave me the freedom to do that. And what you got from me was kind of like my unvarnished opinion about what needs to be. I've been doing this 30 years. I'm 58 years old, and by the way, I became a grandpa today.
Oh, congratulations.
Bexley Grace Landrieu was born this morning at 7:30, and I'm a pawpaw. Y'all can call me Papa Mitch. But once you get to this point, you kind of just have to say to people, look, I've been doing this for 30 years. I have a pretty good sense of what works and what doesn't work. I know the difference between advocating. I was a legislator for 16 years, and that's mostly what legislators do. They come up with big ideas, and then they're one of, when I was in the legislature, I was one of 105. In Congress, you're one of 435. You've got to put something together, and you can be content with just advocating for something that you know is not going to pass so that you can move the ball down the field. But at some point in time, if it's going to become law and everybody's going to be governed by it, you're going to have to compromise, and that's hard for us to do. And the next president of the United States, praying that it's a Democrat, is going to take over a country that is divided, at least 60-40, maybe 55-45. You're going to have a Congress that's split down the middle, and if you don't want them to stay in status, you've got to find a way to move forward, but you got to get the votes. And if you have the votes, you can do something, and if you don't have the votes, you can't. So I heard your question about Nancy Pelosi, who I very much like and have tremendous respect for. We should not ignore her years of experience. She is the one that put Obamacare over the finish line in the House when she was there. So if you go and you say, as Democrats, we believe investing in brains by investing in early childhood education and primary and secondary and high school. We believe in worker training. If we believe in really dealing with climate change, if we believe really in health care, all of which, by the way, are a national security issue, because the Department of Defense the other day said if you really want the country to be strong, I got to have smart people, got to have healthy people, and by the way, climate change is going to wipe out a whole bunch of bases, so we ought to pay attention to them. There is the convergence between domestic policy, national security, and foreign policy, and it fits very nicely if we're smart enough about how to actually get it done. And I think the next, whoever the nominee is, should be a person of experience. They should be a person that can stabilize a country immediately. They should be a person that can restore the nation's credibility at home and abroad as we speak, and then they should, whoever he or she is, begin to prepare aggressively for the future by reaching down to a young generation of leaders and lift them up. That's what I would do.
Mayor Mitch Landrieu, thank you so much.
All right, you guys, thank y'all.